Hey, this is Corinne.
And this is Jill.
And you're listening to Screen Girl Squad. So Jill walked into my house tonight so that we could grab dinner and grab a movie the way we do. And the first words out of her mouth were, "Let's watch Darkness Falls."
I just love it. It's my favorite.
It's so good.
Yep.
And we've referred to it on the podcast before, at least once, if not more. So we headed up to Top Hat Video, and
which we like to plug on this. Go to Top Hat Video, rent movies, keep them in business.
Keep them going. And they had this awesome rack right when we walked in that said, "The first movie that gave you nightmares."
Willy Wonka was on it.
We elected not to watch Willy Wonka.
It's too scary.
But Darkness Falls was right there. We didn't even have to go hunting for it because someone that works at Top Hat Video, this apparently frightened them quite a bit.
Yes. So. We should also comment for Danielle that Mr. Boogedy and Bride of Mr. Boogedy were on the top shelf next to Darkness Falls, which is her very favorite scary movie because it is not scary in the slightest, which it's so dumb. Have you ever seen it?
No.
It was like made by Disney, I think, in like the late 80s, early 90s. And it's terrible. It's so bad. My cousin Ashley owned them and we would watch them in her basement and we thought they were so cool. And then I watched it recent-ish and I was like, oh goodness.
Would it give a child nightmares?
Probably. I mean, it still scares Danielle. So did the Jungle Book.
Scarier then or less scary than the ghost and Mr. Chicken?
I would say probably about the same. It would probably scare her about the same. Yeah.
Well, I meant like, a child. But Danielle also.
Same. Because the ghost of Mr. Chicken scared me when I was little.
That's what I was thinking.
Yeah, like the end when he's all in the house and thinks that things are trying to kill him. That was scary. Yeah. So I would say it was about the same. Yeah.
All right. Yeah, good selection. Definitely, if you're listening to this, go to Top Hat Video. They don't even sponsor us. We just love them so much.
I know, I do. I love them.
So yeah, we made Jill's dream come true, and we watched Darkness Falls this evening.
It's the best. I need to tell you, it's the best. When we get into discussing it, I found a lot of problematic things with this viewing that I never thought about before. So I'm going to bring them all up, but I still love this movie, just to be clear.
Yeah, definitely. There were a couple things that I told Jill, we should make a drinking game out of this problem with the movie.
Yes.
But we'll get into that as we're rating it, I think. So,
yeah.
For those of you that never saw this classic 2003 horror film, we'll give you a quick spoiler-free synopsis. So in the fictional town of Darkness Falls, I assume fictional because who would name their town that?
I would.
So it's this fictional town, I think in Maine, where so many other good, scary things have been set. And there's an elderly woman who's super duper kind to small children and takes their teeth and gives them coins. And some tragic stuff befalls her, and she becomes kind of an urban legend, and starts murdering any child who, sees her.
Yeah.
So...
You know how we all get self-conscious and want to murder people?
Don't look at me! So... the story follows a little boy, Kyle, who is all grown up now and has to return to this town of Darkness Falls after some pretty traumatic events in his childhood to help another kid who's going through a similar situation.
Yes.
That's pretty much it.
That's pretty much all you can say.
Yeah.
It's good. I like it.
This is one of those movies that Jill and I watched again and again and again when we were younger.
Well, and did we go? I'm sure we did. Did we see it for the first time together? You have a better memory.
No, I actually saw this for the first time with our friend Justin.
Oh, did he scream at the screen? I just remember seeing Identity with him, and he was so furious.
No. Well, maybe, but not in as memorable a way.
Okay.
No, he was one of my favorite people to go to the movies with because he was so easy to convince to go do fun things with. I love the types of people that you can be like, hey, on a whim, let's go do this. And they're like, I guess. And they go with you. Yeah. Which,
true.
Yeah. Who did you see it with? You don't remember?
I don't remember. Because I would, like, if it wasn't you, I don't.
You know what I think happened? I think Justin and I saw it, and I loved it so much that I made you go see it again with me on one of those discount Gateway 8 coupon night things.
Yeah. My only other guess is whoever I was dating at the time, depending on when in 2003 it was.
So, naturally, given how frequently we've watched it over the years and how well loved it is, I was kind of nervous about it because we also felt exactly the same way about 13 Ghosts.
Yeah.
And the rewatch was not as enjoyable as I expected it to be for that one.
I was more confident in this one because I have watched it like the last few years in October. Because whenever October rolls around, I just watch as many scary movies as I can. And this is one I've definitely rewatched often.
What are your other go-to October titles?
The Haunting happens every October.
The Owen Wilson one?
Yes. Scream. For a while there, it was The Changeling, but that wasn't like on purpose. It was like we all would get together and mock it together. So I think maybe just those few.
Yeah.
Otherwise, I just will watch whatever.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's kind of how we approach it. We definitely have movies we watch every November and every December. But I don't think that we have any set October rewatches. Usually Insidious, because it's Kelly's all-time favorite.
Oh, Insidious. That's probably true. That one has made the list. Yeah.
But really, I'm pretty happy about watching just any good horror. Or, honestly, I need to watch some more downright terrible horror. My friend Karina keeps sending me these little videos on Instagram when she's watching real bad movies like Deathbed and some like robot cop death mall movie.
Oh my gosh, this sounds amazing. I love this. Is my friend Paige and I, we've seen so many of those terrible movies on Netflix.
Literal B horror movies.
Oh yeah.
What I need to be doing more is watching
so much fun.
Yeah.
They're hilarious and my favorite.
And I don't know why we're not making them. That's next on my things I'm going to talk Jill into doing with me list.
You've been talking about that since we were 13, and we still haven't made a movie.
But now I am a grown-up with money.
Enough money to make a movie?
Enough money to make a real bad one.
Okay. That's fair. Like filmed on a cell phone. No, I'm just kidding.
We could figure it out.
We could?
I have an IMDb page. I was a production assistant on a short horror film. I know just enough to do it real bad.
I'm okay with that. Can we make the one you wrote when we were 14?
Yes, I still have that script in the basement.
Love it.
And we'll go with the original cast.
Okay.
Yeah. All right, then.
The original killer would still to this day work.
With the original weapon, by the way. But
okay.
So.
No spoilers. You guys have to wait and see. You have to talk him into it.
All right. Everyone needs to talk my friend Joe into doing what we tell him to do without argument.
He's got that awesome beard now.
Oh my gosh, that's
Make
true.
Make him the best villain ever.
All right, I'll get to work on it.
All right.
So anyway, back to Darkness Vault. So, this one's going to be tough to rate objectively. I'm going to go ahead and say that right now. Those of you listening will probably hear my fun rating and be like, that's absolutely way too high, and I don't care.
It's not. It's not too high. It's how much we enjoy it.
Yep.
We enjoyed the hell out of this movie. We can rate it as high as we want.
Yeah, I've got a deep and absurd love for this movie. So, Jill introduced me to a new candy today. It's called a Hershey's Cookie Layer Bar.
And the minty one?
It's minty and has like Oreo bits in it or something.
Yep.
So we're definitely going to have to rate the fun rating on that, which if you've listened to our podcast before, you know that's how we roll. We like to rate movies on 2 scales. One, how much we enjoyed it, using some type of food stuff that we also enjoy.
Munch mouths.
Hashtag munch mouths. And also on a fright rating. using something scary from the film itself. Yep. So, on a scale of 1 to 5 Hershey's cookie layer bars, Jill, how much do you adore Darkness Falls?
5.
5, of course.
I got another.
Easy peasy.
Easiest 5 I've ever said in my life.
Because even the stuff that sucks about it is
You
great.
still love it.
Yeah.
I know.
If anything, I love it more. I want to watch it again tomorrow so I can find more problems with people failing to hide their Australian accents.
I'm totally good with this.
We have it for 7 days.
7 days.
Yes. All right. Yep. Easy 5. Good.
Yep.
Now, fright rating. Obviously, we should use a scale of scary tooth fairies. So, scale of 1 to 5 scary tooth fairies. Which I just love saying now.
Should we rate it like on the first time I watched it? Because by this time, my scare factor was lower because I was expecting stuff.
Oh, yeah. I think every time we should rate it like it was the first time we watched it. Yeah.
Good. I would say like 3.5 or 4.
That's what I was thinking. Yeah. 3.5, I think.
3.5 sounds good.
Mm-hmm. Definitely.
4 seems high.
Yeah, 4 is a little high. They did a good job with a lot of things, though.
I agree, which we'll get into in our spoiler section. But there's a lot of things that they did well.
Mm-hmm. Good blend of effective jump scares.
As well as just like tense moments.
Mm-hmm. And it's the kind of horror movie that is scary after you've left the theater or after you've turned it off on your TV. And you're walking the dark hallways of your house, and you're kind of afraid to look up in the corners.
Yep.
Which I have been afraid to look up in the dark corners of my house since 2003 because of this movie. So
this movie and The Grudge did that for me, too. Yeah.
The Grudge.
Wasn't it The Grudge where the first one where she's like in the corner of the house and just like chilling?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Like a spider in the corner.
Yep.
But
a demon.
But worse. Yeah. So tons of fun. Like, definitely a great popcorn movie. Don't spend too long analyzing it.
No, don't think too hard about it. Just enjoy it for what it is.
Be forgiving of the fact that people aren't very good at hiding their accents.
Yeah.
Yeah. Which...
This was filmed in Australia, and we had to look it up because there were so many moments where we were like, that's a lot of accidental Australian accents coming out.
Accidental Australianism. So, I think pretty much the entire supporting cast was Australian. Mm-hmm. I don't know if the little
Some
boy
of
was.
the main. He sounded.
Yeah. Especially in that one
points,
scene.
Yeah.
Where he's like, Caitlin, no.
Yeah.
But the two main characters, the actors were American. Mm-hmm. And yeah, everyone else was Australian.
But trying to be American.
Yeah.
But failing.
And I think it is a sign of the changing of the times where these days, I think if this movie was made today and still filmed in Australia, that they might have been like, screw it, everyone's Australian. This is going to be an Australian horror movie. Mm-hmm. And I wouldn't have had a problem with that at all.
No.
Probably would have
made it better.
Yeah.
Big step up. Put Chris Hemsworth in it.
Well, and I just love Australian TV.
It's true. Best
of Both Worlds, or it was originally called Upper Middle Bogan in Australia, is one of my favorite sitcoms in the entire world.
I've never heard of it. I'll have to check it out.
It's so good. It's on Hulu, and I love it.
Okay.
So, one other interesting thing about this movie, the director, I read in the trivia, he apparently didn't actually want to make a horror movie. He wanted to make solid dramas, you know, and isn't even a horror fan. But he managed to make such an incredibly fun horror film.
Yeah.
And I just found that so impressive. And it must have been addicting because he went on to make a couple other horror movies after this. He made the first Rings, the one that's like a prequel to Ring 2, not the one that's a sequel to all of them.
Okay.
And he also made the Texas Chainsaw Massacre at the beginning.
The Jessica Biel one?
No, that was just the remake.
The Matthew McConaughey one. Which one was the beginning?
So it's the one with Matt Bomer, that guy that he was in White Collar.
I didn't even know he was in one. What's it called?
Texas Chainsaw Massacre, the beginning. It came out like 3 years after Darkness Falls, so 2006.
I don't think I ever watched this one. Probably because the Jessica Biel one kind of traumatized me.
Oh, really?
So I think I remember this one coming out and just being like, nope, not getting tricked by that again.
traumatized you because it was so scary.
Yes.
Yeah.
And just like upsetting. Mm-hmm. Like, I'm not sure scary is the right word. It was more just like really uncomfortable.
Mm. Yeah, that's a fine line, I think. Mm-hmm. Because Unfriended, for example, that we reviewed a few weeks ago, I was uncomfortable by the end of that movie.
Yes.
But it was still very scary, too. And then I think that there are horror movies that they play too heavily on your discomfort without actually managing to be frightening.
Yeah. Well, and I think you and I talked about how I like the first couple Saw movies, but then it just gets wildly out of control. And that Texas Chainsaw Massacre one felt like the wildly out of control. You know, like it was like
torture porn
much. Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Which Darkness Falls is 0%.
Not at all. Yeah.
So let's go ahead and just dive into spoilers so we can talk about why we adore it so very much. Spoilers.
So this movie starts out and we get the origin story of a woman named Matilda. Mm-hmm. So Matilda has like a uncomfortable relationship with children in the town. It makes the adults uncomfortable. It sort of reminds me of when they try to give Freddy Krueger an origin story and they talk about how like the kids are uncomfortable with his, you know, like the parents were uncomfortable with his relationship with the kids. So they freak out and burn him alive. Like it was the same thing. They thought she had an inappropriate friendship with children and some kids go missing. So they assume it was her.
Naturally.
And burn her at the stake.
Hang her.
Oh, I thought they burned her.
Well, so she was in a fire earlier.
Oh, that's right. And her face was weird. And so, you know, make fun of the disfigured people. So she gets killed and then the kids all magically appear the next morning because she had nothing to do with it. Yeah. So they just killed her for no reason.
And her last words were all super ominous because
she was, yeah.
So her whole relationship with the kids was she was the local tooth fairy. They would bring her their teeth, which is gross. Mm-hmm. And she would give them money.
Because she just, I think, wanted friends because the adults probably stayed away from her because she was all burned.
Yeah. So when she's about to be hanged, she says, what I took before in kindness, I will take forever in revenge.
Yeah. So clearly she's upset.
Can't imagine why.
So that was all like black and white and
it was
origin story.
Yeah.
So then it like cuts to modern day 2003 and there's a boy in the bathroom mirror like pulling out a tooth,
which was gross.
Now listen, this is a thing that bugged me through the whole movie. How old would you say this boy is?
13, maybe 12.
When did you lose your last tooth?
I honestly don't remember.
We're not in junior high. I guarantee that.
Yeah, I do think you're right. I think I lost all of them when I was in elementary school. We had this one teacher named Mrs. Acosta who was awesome. And if you had a loose tooth, no matter what the grade, and you went to her with it, she would yank it right out of your face. Yeah. So she was, I think, just always super irritated with kids working their teeth with their tongues and stuff. Just so gross. I totally get that now.
Yep.
So I'm pretty sure that I lost all of my teeth when I was still at that particular school.
I would think. I mean, most kids lose all of their teeth while in elementary school. So it bugged me because, like, how old is this kid? Because he's losing a tooth, but then a little while later gets kissed, and goes to a dance. So he's, like, older.
Yeah.
But then, like, 12 years later...
Yeah.
And I mean, anyway, the age thing was weird.
And then the kid, for the whole rest of the movie, that he's being tormented by the tooth fairy, that kid's like 8 years old.
Yeah. They talk about how he had just lost his last tooth.
Is there that much variety? I honestly don't know.
I can't imagine that there is. But I don't know.
Yeah, I don't either.
But
I almost want to text my mom.
Weird.
When did I lose my last tooth?
I know. It was weird to me. That whole... There's a lot of moments where I'm like, how old were they? Anyway, so he loses a tooth and it's all like bloody and he's in the bathroom. I don't know. Maybe he knocked a tooth out playing hockey. So, but he
just
still
him working that
tooth
out with his hand.
Fairy. Anyway, spoiler alert. If you believe in the tooth fairy, stop listening. So we're going to ruin it.
We will.
So, yeah, he's like working out this, he's like, mouth is full of blood. He's working out this loose tooth. And then his mom tucks him in, which, I mean, maybe because my mom worked nights and my dad put us all to bed, but I don't think I was tucked in after the age of like 5 or 6. So that was different for me too. But your parents were a little more protective. You probably got tucked in more than that. I kind of remember your mom tucking us in.
Yeah, like I didn't necessarily like actually physically tuck in the bed or whatever, but they would always come in and say goodnight and not even bother turning out the light because they knew I'd be up for 3 more hours reading anyway.
Yeah.
So.
Well, and I would always like say goodnight to my dad on my way to bed, but it wasn't like, I don't know, he was never strict on bedtime or anything, so.
I know, mine neither, and
like basically, if we
now.
were quiet, it didn't matter.
Yeah. And by night owl, I mean I'm awake in bed reading.
Yeah.
Not partying like I used to in my
I
youth.
used to be that way, and now it's like 9:30 and I'm out.
Yeah, I can't fall asleep now until I've done the New York Times crossword for the day.
Which is an interesting thing to do right before bed.
I like it.
I would think it would like wake your brain up.
Then my bedtime gets later and later as the week goes on, though,
because it gets harder.
Yeah, the Friday crossword is a beast.
Makes sense. All right.
Anyway, so yeah, the mom
comes and tucks him in, and I mean, maybe I just didn't have super affectionate parents, and that's okay too.
Yeah, Jill, stop like imposing your experiences on this poor child who's about to be tormented forever.
I mean, it's fine. His mom can tuck him in till he's 80. I don't care.
She can't though because of what's about to happen.
How old he is, and it bothers me. Well, and like his voice is still relatively high, so young teens works. And anyway, so he goes to bed, then he gets up again, and you like hear rustling outside his window, and he gets all nervous, and a girl climbs in his window.
A girl played, by the way, by Emily Browning. Who is my favorite.
Yes. And she crawls in the window and I'm like, Corinne, it's that girl you love. And she's like, no, she's too old. Like, the age doesn't match up or whatever. And then we looked it up and it was.
Yeah, so I didn't realize this movie came out the year before Series of Unfortunate Events. I thought there was a huge gap between those.
Yeah.
So I thought, no way could this be Emily Browning because I assumed it came out 5 years before Series of Unfortunate Events. Not
Sadly,
the case.
No. Which, because wasn't Series of Unfortunate Events one of like Netflix's first originals? Or was it a movie?
So in 2004, it was a movie.
That's right. And then it came out.
Yeah.
Okay. For some reason, I was thinking it was always a Netflix original, but I was like, that seems too old.
Yeah, in the movie, Jim Carrey had Neil Patrick Harris's role.
That's right. Yeah.
Yeah.
I've never seen or read any of them, so I get confused. Maybe I watched the first movie.
It was pretty fun. I liked it.
Yeah.
I have a real low threshold for, or I should say, I have a really high threshold for like children's adventure movies.
Yeah.
All the ones people hate, I'm like, that was great. I own Aragon.
Yeah. Okay, I can't agree with you on Aragon, but I do like most of them. Yeah.
Yeah.
So anyway, girl climbs in his bedroom window. They talk about how there's a dance coming up.
A boy-girl
and they're going to go
dance.
together. And they talk about, she's like, yeah, my mom can drive us. So they're young. And then they kiss. And she says the weirdest thing. Where she's like, your first time shouldn't taste like blood. And it's like, homeboy, you were in the bathroom. Why don't you like swish your mouth out after pulling the bloody tooth out?
Yeah.
Because gross.
Yeah.
Anyway.
And I wouldn't think it would taste like blood for long anyway. And also, it was a peck. It's not like their tongues were like swirling around.
It shouldn't have tasted like blood anyway.
Yeah.
And can we talk about how many times in scary movies people kiss when one or both of them are covered in blood?
I think we've talked about this before.
Yes,
this is totally a pet peeve of yours.
We talked about it in It chapter where she like touches it with her bloody hand. Why is this a thing? Anyway, so yeah, that happened and I was like, of course, somebody's bleeding, so they kissed.
Yeah.
Yeah, they decide to go to the dance together and she crawls back out the window.
And warns them, hey, remember, no peeking when the tooth fairy gets here.
Right. So then he lays down in bed, and does he cover his face first or
No.
after? Okay.
Yeah. So there's some pretty effective shadow movements.
Yes.
I love this scene, honestly, because
It's this beginning, like this opening bit is so great. The
Yeah.
whole thing.
it's totally solid. They set it up super well. There's all these different shapes in his room, like, normal bedroom shapes. And he's even got like a model ship on the dresser and stuff. So shadows are being cast in strange
And they
directions.
do a really good, like, I think we've talked about this before, that I have night terrors, and sometimes I wake up and I can't move because I'm sure that there is a monster standing in the corner of my room, or like a person. And like, now that I have a roommate, I'm like, Rachel's just messing with me. And then there's nobody there. So she jokes she's going to do it for real sometime. And I told her I may kill her.
Bad enough she keeps leaving that David Tennant standee everywhere.
Exactly. For folks at home, we have a stand-up of David Tennant who regularly scares the crap out of me. Yeah, like things in the dark. Like, I had to be really careful about setting up my room, and I have to rearrange my furniture because I have like doors to an outside patio, and they're covered by like blackout curtains, but I have just enough shadows coming through that it's really hard for me to sleep if it's like stormy or the moon is too bright and I can see like tree shapes. Anyway, I have to like
Yeah.
move my bed so I can't see that anymore. But I like couldn't have a mirror anywhere near my bed. Like, I have to be careful about what I can see when I'm in bed. So this scene was really cool because I was like, no, the like stuff looks scary at night when you can't tell, like when
Yeah.
you're asleep and your brain is doing its own thing.
Yeah.
So I loved this scene.
And like the effect that a passing car can have on the shadows, because
Yes.
the headlights come by and everything appears to move. So they played with that really well, and they had her shadow kind of flitting across the walls, and she's making this creepy guttural sound with her mouth, which I read is an actual recording of an elderly woman, and they would like speed it up or slow it down depending on the pitch that they needed for the sound.
Yeah.
So it was a really effective sound effect, and he does what I, as a 30-something woman, would do, and he pulls the sheets up over his head.
And grabs a flashlight.
Yeah.
And luckily in this movie, they do not break scary movie rules, and he is safe in his bed. Like
With
the
his
covers.
flashlight,
Yes.
yeah.
With the flashlight. So he's hiding under his sheets, and then, I think he's doing the teenage boy thing where he's like, buck up, little camper, we can do this. So he like moves the sheets down, and there's this face floating in front of him.
Yeah, a face that's covered by a porcelain mask, which right there, that's scary.
So scary. Like a hood and a porcelain mask and some crazy eyes are all he sees.
Yeah.
Which I wanted to ask you, because you've mentioned before you don't like it when they show the monster right away.
Yes.
Does this count for that? Or is it okay
I'm
with
so glad
you?
you asked, because I'll talk about it more in a couple minutes, but this one, even though they show her right away, there's still such an element of otherworldliness and mystery because her face is covered with that cracked porcelain mask, and you can only see parts of her actual skin around the eyes. So they show you her, but they're showing you a masked version of her. So I didn't feel like it was too early or took away too much.
Excellent. Because it doesn't bother me either. And I'm with you that sometimes I'm like, you should have waited to show me what that demon looks like, because now I'm not scared anymore.
Yeah.
And I did not feel that way with
Yeah,
this
I think
movie.
she's still totally effective and scary.
Absolutely. Good. I'm glad to hear we agree. So yeah, he sees her face, freaks out, shines the flashlight on her, which makes her scatter, like fly off into the corner or something. I don't know where she goes. And he runs into the bathroom, which is like all white, brightly lit. And he's like freaking out. And his mom hears him and comes in to talk to him. And he's like, she's in my room, she's gonna get me, whatever. And the mom's like, cool, I'll go check it out. Listen, as a woman, and not a mother, but if I were a mother and my kid was that terrified, I'm turning on the lights.
Yes.
Every light in the whole dang house just to check things out.
Yeah.
As a woman, You do not, like, if someone is scared, you do not enter a dark room and just be like, oh, no, everything's fine.
I think that's just as a person.
Completely unrealistic for me. But, like, so he's like, stay in the light to his mom. And she's like, yeah. Walks down the dark hallway into his dark bedroom without turning on any lights. And then turns around and is like, see, there's nothing to be scared of. Bam, eaten by the tooth fairy.
Yeah, which totally was a huge fear for me as a child because you both want your parents to go investigate the thing and you are terrified of your parents investigating the thing.
Yeah.
So.
But yeah, it was unrealistic to me that her son's like, stay in the light, and she doesn't turn on a light. Like, even just to appease him. Like, even if she wasn't scared, just be like, okay, honey, bam, light on. You know, like...
Well, and if Kelly and I get all of that riled up by a weird noise or something, we both turn on all the lights. Like, I think that's just that's what you do to make it easier to settle yourself down.
Yes. So. Every time I have a night terror, once I can move, the light turns on just to make sure there's not a monster in the corner. Yes. But, like, you just have to... turn on a light. Anyway, so it was unrealistic to me that she didn't turn on a light. But it was a really good scene.
Oh, yeah.
That she turns around and she's like, see, nothing to be scared of, and then just gets snatched.
Yeah, she like turns slightly and sees the tooth fairy's face, which is, you know, just asking for death in this film.
Yeah.
And gets taken away. So that was a really effective scare too. And the boy stumbles backwards and like hops into the bathtub and pulls on the shower curtain and kind of breaks it a little bit, and he's hiding in there. And there's this really beautiful shot that kind of starts focused in on his face and draws backwards out of the bathroom. And his face is like half covered by the shower curtain. And Jill and I were both like, that's such a beautiful shot.
Yeah. And like the bathroom is all, like we said before, white and lit up. And it's super light, bright, normally would be happy looking, but his face is so terrified.
Yeah.
And just like... almost in a trance. Like, he's so traumatized.
Yeah.
And it was just really well done.
And then the camera pulls back further into the dark hallway, and the tooth fairy is hovering near the ceiling. She's like floating there, and they show her full form. So you can see her mask, her hood, like the way that she's floating there.
She's got this floating cloak that sort of like is torn at the bottom and floats in every direction.
Yeah, like it sort of looks like the Dementors in the Harry Potter movies.
I think that's a very good comparison.
And once again, even though they showed her entire form, like you saw full blast, it didn't take away from it because she looked so unnatural that it was very creepy.
Yes, it was very creepy.
Yeah.
So cut to the next morning, and there's a bunch of cops outside his house, as well as Caitlin, his little girlfriend, we'll call her his girlfriend, and like a bunch of neighbors and stuff like that. And he is getting handcuffed and stuffed in the back of a police car. And the cops are all talking about, like, I can't believe he did that to his mom. Like, he's clearly messed up. And he's still, like, not talking, dead in the face, just sitting in the back of a cop car.
Yeah, like catatonic.
Yeah. And he, like, drives away in the cop car. And Caitlin just, like, watches him go, like, all heartbroken. So then it says, it cuts to 12 years later, which again, I have all kinds of questions about. So if they were like 13, they'd be like, what, 25? They don't look very 25. Anyway, they
How old
look
do
more
they
like late 20s, early 30s.
That's what I was thinking too.
And Caitlin is there with her brother.
Her younger brother.
Her younger brother, which they should have made him her son. Because that would make way more sense. Because I was thinking about it, so... my aunt had 2 boys. Like, the next youngest was, like, I think Robbie was, like, 9 or 10 when the younger one was born. And his older brother was maybe, like, 19 or 20. So there was a big gap. But they would have been at least 20 years apart. Which, like... just doesn't happen very often.
No. Like, what is it? Some Utah family?
But there was, like, no kids in between.
Yeah.
And then there is zero explanation about the parents. They don't talk about them at all. Why are they not there? Why is she taking care of her brother? Why is he so much younger than her? Like, none of these things are talked about.
Yeah, I did think it was kind of strange he wasn't her son.
Yeah. Like, it just seems like, as a story point, like, it would have made it easier for me if he was her son.
Yeah. The only thing I could think of, and I was thinking about this once, you know, she reconnects with Kyle and everything, is Maybe they made him her brother to simplify that romantic relationship, but that's not unusual either. Like,
Yeah.
you know, to be a single mom and
Well, and like there's a scene later where the guy who was either dating her or trying to date her talks about how nobody else ever had a chance in town because Kyle was gone.
mm-hmm.
But like, so maybe they were trying to stick with that. Like she never liked
I can
anybody
see
else.
that. Yeah.
But still, I don't know. It just didn't make a lot of sense to me. And
Yeah.
It kind of bothered me.
Yeah.
Like, it would have been fine if they had said something like, yeah, when my parents died and I had to take care of my brother or whatever, like something. They just didn't talk about it at all.
Yeah, it was a little strange.
Yeah. Like weird that she's taking care of her brother and no mention of why.
Mm-hmm.
So that was, anyway. But so she's with her brother at the hospital. He's getting a lot of tests done. They say he hasn't slept in weeks for more than like 10 minutes at a time.
Mm-hmm.
And he's just exhausted. And the doctors are basically like,
Yeah, they think maybe he's got night terrors.
Yeah.
They're not sure.
Yeah. So this is the other thing that was weird for me.
And I just want to take a quick aside real quick and talk about how it is very possible and very common to love something 5 stars, but still find lots of little problems with it.
Okay, good. Because I really do love this movie.
I know, I love it so much.
And I still want to keep saying that over and over again.
Yeah,
So-
but as we said, like, it's not without its faults. It's just that
No.
it's so much fun that you, like, apart from a passing thought of, like, why the hell is he her brother and not her son? Like,
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
It's still a lot of fun.
And if we weren't talking about it on this podcast, I probably wouldn't have picked it up, picked it apart as much as I did. But so then 12 years later, she hasn't seen Kyle since he got arrested for killing his mom.
Right.
Like everyone else in town thinks he killed his mom. It comes up a lot in the movie, right?
Yeah.
So her brother can't sleep, so she calls him.
Yeah.
Like this guy she had a crush on when she was 13, and he may or may not have killed his mom.
Yeah.
First person she calls.
Yes. So that's kind of an odd level of attachment to
Like-
your girlhood crush, basically.
Right.
So,
Like, I could make some comparisons with people in my life that I'm like, if like now something happened to me, would I call even like this person who was really important to me when I was in high school?
No.
I would not. Like that would not cross my mind.
yeah. However, she was pretty sure that her little brother might be going through something similar to what Kyle went through.
Yes.
So I guess maybe if you were going through something right now that someone that we knew in high school had also gone through, maybe. But even then, I would feel so weird about it. I'd be like,
Right.
hey, you remember that traumatizing thing that happened to you?
Remember that horrible thing that happened to you and
The
how you
worst
got
day of your
arrested
life?
for killing
Yeah.
your mom? Do you want to come help me with my little brother? And then he comes
Mm-hmm.
because he's like, of course I do. What?
Yeah. Okay, I definitely found that strange. So they cut to Kyle, who has now made a home in Las Vegas, which I thought was pretty clever because he hates being in the dark, and Las
Right.
Vegas is all neon and brightly lit all the time.
City that never sleeps. No, that's New York.
Well,
But Vegas is probably the same.
and this was probably one of the most like stylistic and cool scenes in the movie when they introduce adult Kyle. There's like a couple cool little shots of him like taking his medicines and listening to music and stuff, and the way that they did like the sound and the camera work, it was just kind of nifty. So his phone rings, and it's Caitlin, aka Kat, doing just what Jill said,
Yeah.
calling up and being like, hey, there's something weird going on with my brother. And they do this kind of cool reveal where he turns and looks at his wall where he's been drawing the tooth fairy for the last 12 years, like increasingly creepily.
And I'm going to skip ahead just a tiny bit.
Yes.
Because later in the film, spoiler alert, he goes to the police station to answer some questions. They talk about how he was in an institution for 9 years. So of those 12 years he's been gone, 9 of them he was hospitalized.
Okay, so that probably says how old he was then, right? Like, so was he in the institution until he was 20 and he went in at 11? And now he's 24? I can't add
22?
23, 22?
Because he's been gone 12 years. So if he was...
Wait, 9
Wait,
or 12.
maybe 23?
We are so bad at math.
I can't math.
No. Anyway, so he has gone to the lengths of moving to Las Vegas because he is so scared of being in the dark.
Mm-hmm.
And he's been drawing these super creepy pictures of the Tooth Fairy this whole time. And the first time someone's like, hey, she might be back and tormenting my little brother, he's like, oh, sure, let me run right back into danger.
Right? Well, and like, if he was institutionalized for 9 years, he's only been back in society for 3 years.
Mm-hmm.
Like, yet everything he does in this movie, I don't know, that just doesn't make a lot of sense to me. Like, I feel like he would have kind of a hard time fitting in with society. Yet he's totally fine.
What? No, he's not.
Well, I mean...
Like, the scene at the bar, he's clearly uncomfortable being around people.
Oh, for sure. But then, like, knows how to deal with the cops. And, like... Like, when being questioned by the police, he's totally cool about it. And he's like, yeah, I need a lawyer. Like, he's not...
Well, I assume he watched an awful lot of Law and Order while he was in the hospital.
That's fair. That's fair.
I mean, what else? That's what I would do. But,
What else would you do?
Yeah.
Yeah. Anyway, it just... When they said that he'd been in a hospital for 9 years, or like in an institution for 9 years, I was like, he's only been gone for 12 years. Like,
I'm just picturing that meme of that blonde woman who's like looking at all the different math symbols and is clearly confused. That's us
like,
right now.
As we've talked about before, we take notes, and every couple of lines, I'm like, how old are they?
We want answers.
I just want to quote IQ when they talk about how time doesn't exist. So, because that's really the only explanation here.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, it's a mystery, all right.
Mm-hmm. Anywho,
so yeah.
12, air quotes, years later. So yeah, Kyle's like living in this big open loft. Like, there's no places for shadows to be, which was cool to see, like, where he chose to live, everything, which also made it weird that he's just like, all right, drop everything, I gotta go.
Yeah.
Like,
Well,
he's made quite a comfortable life for himself.
It kind of reminded me of another movie. Was it The Boogeyman, where he was also afraid of the dark?
I believe so, because similar experiences.
And he has like a clear refrigerator.
Yeah.
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 I've wanted one of those ever since I saw The
Pretty
Boogeyman.
cool. I know. Except then your fridge always has to be clean.
Oh, that's true. No one wants to like walk past and see all of my uneaten leftover containers.
And like the spills.
Yes. So yeah, he goes back to Darkness Falls and
immediately goes to see the brother at the hospital who he's never met before.
Doesn't even check in with Caitlin or let her know he's here. He just walks right into, what is the kid's name? Charlie? David?
Michael.
Just walks into Michael's room and is like, hey, buddy, let's talk about why you're scared.
And Michael immediately is like, you've seen her too.
Can we talk about how adorable Michael is?
Oh my gosh. He has like a little lisp. He's just the cutest thing in the whole world.
Yes. And he did a great job, I thought.
Fantastic.
Yeah. So good job, kid actor who's an adult now. But because during this conversation, he's kind of accusing Kyle of not being straight with him. Because he's like, are you still afraid of the dark? And Kyle lies and says, nope.
Well, and he's like, Caitlin says that when I'm an adult, I won't be scared anymore because adults aren't scared. Is that true? And he's like, yeah.
Yeah. So it's kind of a cute scene where Michael is kind of forcing Kyle to come to terms with what's really going on. But Kyle still seems very doubtful at this stage that the Tooth Fairy is... Did you get that impression? It's like
like that she would be after this little kid.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And maybe he's thinking, I didn't lose my last baby tooth till I was like in high school.
Maybe.
But he gives Michael one of his flashlights so that Michael doesn't have to be so afraid of the dark. And Caitlin walks in and sees them together and pulls Kyle out in the hallway to kind of pick his brain and see what he thinks is going on with Michael.
Kyle immediately was like, did Michael just lose his last tooth? Because that's normal for the 7-year-old kid to lost his last tooth.
Yeah.
Even though Kyle was much older.
Again, we have no idea what is normal.
I wrote again in my notes, so how old was Kyle? So they have a nice little catch up. They have a big hug, and she's just like, I've missed you, and I can't believe you were gone for so long, or whatever. And he's like, kind of brushing her off, like, yeah, good to see you too. But like, you can tell he's excited to see her too. And I got the impression they must have known each other like their whole lives.
Yeah.
Like, I would assume she's the girl next door or something.
Yeah.
Because they were much too connected as children to just be casual acquaintances.
Yeah, and that has to be why he came back. Like, he couldn't have come back because he thought that Michael was really being stalked by the Tooth Fairy. And maybe he isn't even sure that that's what happened to him when he was a kid, because he's, you know, been institutionalized for so long and in treatment. So I guess probably the thing that brought him back to Darkness Falls was
this girl.
Yeah, the hope
the
of
one
rekindling.
That got away.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So all of the sudden, a fella named Larry shows up, who appears to be Caitlin's boyfriend.
Yeah.
He puts his arm around her. Thanks for coming, man. We've been so worried about Michael. It's so great you can come help us out. Like, drops a lot of terms like that. And Kyle kind of immediately is like, message received.
Yeah.
You know, like, got it, buddy. Staking your claim.
If Larry was a cat, he would have walked in and peed on everything. Yeah. Like, just be warned, this is my territory.
So then Larry's like, hey, let's go get some drinks and catch up. And Kyle's like, I don't drink, which, considering the pharmacy he was taking at the beginning of the movie, probably a good idea.
Yeah, I don't know very many mental health medications that interact well with alcohol.
Right. So they go out for a beer. Kyle is just sitting there, as Corinne said, awkward and uncomfortable, while Larry is talking at him. Larry talks about how he's a defense attorney, which again made me write, how old are they? Because if they were like 13 or 14, they would be like 25, maybe 26. I don't know any people who were done with law school and a practicing attorney at 25 or 26. Yeah. Maybe I'm crazy, but
I don't even know how long that takes.
I would like the ones that I know, it took them longer.
Yeah, because let's see, 18 to 22 for your undergrad.
Yeah.
At least 2 years of law school.
Yeah. And then a lot of them have to like, internship or a clerkship or something. Like, there's kind of a long process. Like,
maybe Larry is currently clerking as a defense attorney.
But thinks he's cooler.
Yeah, he just wants Kyle to be like, listen,
yeah,
I obviously am a better provider than you, so get out of Caitlin's whole business.
Yeah, like, I don't know. It just seemed fishy.
Yeah.
Whatever. It's just one of those things. So he's a defense attorney.
Jill just made air quotes.
I did. So in the meantime, there's this guy at the bar. We need to talk about this too. Okay. So like, if he was like 13 or 14, if someone saw me who didn't like currently know me, I don't know that they would match me up with my 13-year-old self.
Oh, they 100% would, because you look exactly the same.
I don't know, because I was like super awkward and like tomboy and wouldn't brush my hair, but like, nah, I don't know. You know what I mean? Like,
well, just because you dress better, like, you still have the same face.
I don't know. Like, people change when they get older, and he did not look the same.
To settle this, I propose that on our page we post pictures of us at 13 and pictures of us recently side by side. And we let people see how exactly the same we look.
Fine. And that if you would see one of us when we were younger, you would stop us on the street and know everything about our lives.
Well, I mean, not everything about our lives, but I was at the bakery the other day and ran into a girl we went to high school with, and she recognized me.
Yes, so. But that was someone we went to school with from when you came to public school with me, 6th grade through high school. Not, like, would she be able to recognize Shannon the same? Because Shannon moved when we were in, like, 7th grade.
That's a fair point. All right, listeners, we're going to put it to you to decide.
Anyway. He sees this guy in the bar and immediately is like, that's the mother killer.
Yeah.
Like,
So this supporting cast member's name is Ray, and he is played by one of my favorite character actors. His name is Angus Sampson.
oh my gosh, Angus.
Yeah, he is Australian.
Love it.
He's much better than most at covering his Australian accent.
Yeah, he did very well.
And you might remember him from the Insidious movies because he plays Tucker. And he is, yeah.
Way to do something I didn't figure out.
Uh-huh. I got you, Jill. I got you.
Boom. I did think he looked kind of familiar, but I assumed it was from this movie and just let it go.
Victory Corinne. So Tucker in the Insidious movies, he is the psychic's assistant. He's one of the film crew guys. And I laughed so hard when they introduced him in this film because he's at the bar and he's eating peanuts or something. And Tucker in the Insidious movies is eating in like 100% of the scenes. Like they'll knock on someone's door and he's eating an ice cream cone for no reason. Or like... So I don't know if that's like a coincidence or if Angus Sampson is like, listen, if I'm going to be in this movie, I get to eat the whole time, whatever I want.
Maybe so.
But so he plays Ray, the like small town bully that never grew up.
Yeah. So he's basically like, hey, that kid killed his mom. Mm-hmm. I'm going to beat him up.
Yeah.
Because that makes sense.
Totally logical.
Because even if he had killed his mom, this guy's a convicted killer. I'm going to pick a fight with him?
Mm-hmm.
Whatever.
Especially if he had, like, brutally murdered his mother.
Right.
Because obviously the Tooth Fairy, like, savaged her. And when he was some age...
Somewhere between 10 and 19.
And is now a greater age.
Increased by 12.
And larger.
And spent 9 years in an institution.
So Ray goes over and starts like poking at him, you know, like the King England coming into your house and pushing you around. So he goes over, like starts, you know, picking on Kyle.
He walks up and he's like, hey, mama killer.
Yeah.
Like, that's his opening line.
Larry, the friend, heroically sits there and does nothing.
Like, he's just like, cool, he's gonna get beat up.
He literally
It's
like
fun.
cowers.
Yeah.
And doesn't stand up for him at all.
Which I wouldn't say he's his friend, because he's just there to mark his territory.
Yeah. I mean, it seemed like... So Larry also is in the very, very beginning of the movie. He's with Caitlin watching Kyle get, like, packed away in the cop car and driven away. So you kind of have the impression that they were childhood friends, and now Larry views him as a competitor or something.
I think he probably did then, too.
Yeah. So Kyle leaves the bar, goes out to the back, and, you know, lights pop off and feels very ominous. And then he gets tackled from behind by Ray, who rolls into the forest with him, and they have a nice little fist fight.
You know how they build bars in the middle of forests?
I don't know what Maine is like.
I don't know. But it was like the porch and then this big hill that just rolls down into the forest. Because you know how drunk people cannot fall off stuff. Seems real smart.
They're pretty reliable at not falling off of things.
So yeah, they get in a fight. They roll down into the forest. So they're just out there fighting. And Kyle sees over his shoulder, like the Tooth Fairy just hovering in a tree. And she kind of like creepily peeks out from behind the tree, which is really cool. And you're just like, oh, snap. And she immediately swoops down and eats the other guy.
Yeah.
Which I don't know that he saw her first. So there was a little inconsistency with,
I thought he
don't
did.
look at her and then she can just eat people.
Yeah, I'm not sure.
I'm like, I wasn't sure on all of the villains.
I thought that he had.
And maybe he did. Like, maybe he turned over his shoulder.
Yeah, I thought
and
he like
looked at
glimpsed her in the tree for a second, but I'm not sure. But yeah, he gets like plucked upwards in the air. And next scene, there's a search party like in the woods. All the sheriff's
So it's like Larry and the cops are on a search. And you get the impression that Larry works with them all the time. I mean, he's a defense attorney.
And they all grew up together.
Yeah. So they all know each other and they're off on this search party looking for the guys. And they split up, and Larry is just a total chicken. And the whole time he's like, do you really think we should be splitting up? And then he starts chanting. This is my favorite part. Larry's like, you're a grown man. You're safe. You're a grown man.
I
You're
identified
safe.
with that so
And
much.
then a body falls from the sky on top of Larry. It was so perfect. I loved it so much.
Yes.
So then Kyle like, is gone. They don't see Kyle anywhere.
Yeah.
So, cutscene, he is at the hospital looking for Caitlin. So he finds Caitlin, and he's clearly just had the crap kicked out of him. Like, he's all messed up.
Yeah.
And Caitlin's like, oh my gosh, sit down. Let me give you first aid. You have gravel in your head. Let me get it out.
Which
like,
she picks out with like a big tweezer.
Yeah. She helps herself to the hospital equipment. You know.
I mean, she's obviously in love with him, so she's like, "Oh, look at you! You're injured. Let me put my paws on you."
To
like,
you.
any
Yes.
excuse to touch
Right.
you.
Exactly. So she's like giving him first aid. They're like having a good conversation, and he like is having a hard time letting her like get the rocks out of his head. And so she's like, just sum up the rest of your life in like 30 seconds for me. And he starts talking about how he went into foster care. But when?
Oh, right. Because if he was in an institution for 9 years.
Right. When did he go to foster care?
Was
Anyway.
it a euphemism, maybe? I don't know.
Yeah, maybe he didn't want to tell her he was hospitalized.
Yeah.
He, like, they talk about how he went to foster care. And I think he talks about how he went to therapy.
Mm-hmm.
And then she gets all the rocks and stuff out of his head, and the cops show up and arrest him.
Because presumably he murdered Ray in the woods.
Right, and dropped him from the sky on top of Larry.
Yes.
Logic. So, makes perfect sense.
I like the idea that, like, the tooth fairy was, like, floating up in the sky, just, like, nibbling on Ray for a while, and then, like, throws him out like a king in times of yore, like, throwing chicken bones over his shoulders.
Yes.
Yes, just like that.
Or I like that she's just standing up and is like, hee 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 hee. Drop. That guy looks scared.
I mean, who's to say that evil ghosts don't have a sense of humor?
I think she absolutely does. So he gets arrested. They sit him down. They're questioning him. That's when they talk about how he was in a mental hospital for 9 years.
And the sheriff is basically being a giant dick about mental health issues as a whole.
Like, he's like reading off his medications. Like, he's like, here's your pharmacy you had in your pocket. Like, Klonopin and... Anyway,
I don't remember
reads
what
off a list of...
He mentions, like, antipsychotics. And he's basically treating it like, oh, you have, like, medications, so that makes you a suspect?
Yes.
And I was like, okay, I hope the sheriff eats it, because he sucks.
He does suck. Like, he just assumes you've had struggles, you're a murderer.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And so based on that sheriff's age, I assume he's the same sheriff that arrested him as a child.
I would assume. And I think it was.
Yeah.
Yeah. So he's giving him a really hard time. In the meantime, Michael gets attacked again in his hospital room.
Mm-hmm.
And the nurses keep doing things like, oh, he's sleeping, I'll turn the lights out. And then he like freaks out and gets attacked.
Yeah.
So similar thing happens. His lights get knocked out, though, I believe. And they find him in the bathroom just screaming. He, like, locks himself in the bathroom.
Yeah.
And the lights are on, and they find him, and, like, his arm is all scratched up, and he's, like, screaming at the top of his lungs.
Yeah, and I liked that it was a nice little callback to where Kyle had hidden in the beginning of the film, because Michael is, instead of being in a bathtub, because there isn't one, it's like a walk-in shower, but the shower curtain is still kind of, like, half pulled over, and he's got this huge gash down his arm.
Yeah. It was a good callback.
Yeah.
So his sister's like freaking out, obviously. She talks to the doctor, who says he's had a psychotic break from night terrors and lack of sleep. And says that they can perform a procedure that will make him basically face his fears. So they'll put him in a sensory deprivation tank and just put him in the dark until he's not scared anymore.
Yeah.
And his sister's like, all right, if it's going to help, right?
Which that sounds terrifying.
It sounds terrifying, but I think it's, like, become, like, an actual mental health practice to, like, have people slowly face their fears to conquer them.
Aversion therapy.
Yes,
yeah.
Yes. I couldn't think of the name, so good job.
I know that because of Parks and Rec, because Ann Perkins makes Leslie go through a form of aversion therapy when she's all nervous about going out on a date for the first time in a long time. So,
fabulous.
As previously discussed, everything I know from television.
They made a musical of Matilda, and there's a whole song where he's like, everything I know, I learned from telly. And he just goes, oh no, you would love it. Anyway, so Kyle gets released from the jail. They don't really talk about why. I guess they just determine we don't have any evidence to keep you. You have to go.
Yeah, and they release him like into his attorney's care for custody.
So he immediately goes to an outdoor store and stocks up on flashlights.
Flashlights,
First place he
batteries.
goes. Yeah. Like tests them all out, tries them all out, gets really good batteries. They get in the car and Larry starts driving him out of town. And the whole time he's talking about how no one ever had a chance with Caitlin because she was always holding a torch for you. Like, you just have to leave because I finally got her to agree to date me. And then you show back up and you're ruining everything. Basically being a whiny little baby about Caitlin instead of letting her make her own decisions. Jeez.
Stupid Larry.
She can date who she wants, Larry, and it's not you. So Larry's real mad. Kyle pulls a gun out. Which, where did he get the gun from?
Oh, so when he's at the hardware store, the store clerk is like, you want any of these guns? Kyle's like, no, just the flashlights and whatever. And the clerk goes to ring him up, and Kyle steals the gun from the case. I assume. Like, they show him looking at the gun and putting a lot of attention to it. Yeah, so it's pretty quick.
I missed
but
that.
Yeah, they kind of implied that he was going to pocket it.
So he kifes a gun.
Yeah, and then when Larry mentions, oh, they're about to put Michael in a sense-up tank and make him face his fears.
Freaking out. And he's like, take me back to Michael. Don't let them put him in the dark. Like, you take me to the hospital right now. And Larry's like, no.
And Kyle's like, oh, look, I have this gun.
Yeah, and so Kyle pulls a gun and he's like, take me to Michael right now.
Yeah.
And Larry's like, and then they crash the car into a tree. Like,
yes. Well, so because the tooth fairy swoops in front of them.
Swoops in and he swerves and they crash into a tree. And then the tooth fairy flies in and grabs Larry and pulls him out of the car.
Yeah. Kyle's like, don't look at her. So Larry's like, okay, I'm going to look at her.
Yeah. Don't look at her. What, like this?
And here's the thing about being a lawyer in a horror movie or like an adventure movie. Basically, any movie that's not specifically about lawyers.
You're going to die.
You're going to die.
Maybe on the toilet in the middle of the jungle.
Or maybe you'll get sliced in half by some scary glass doors.
One of those things is bound to happen. So, oh, yeah. She like pulls him up into the air and Kyle is standing below and you can just hear him like screaming as he's getting like flown around in the air. Like he's like, rah, rah, like all over. And then he drops down and he's like, oh my gosh. And then she comes down and pulls him away again.
Yeah.
So like we talked about earlier that she might have a sense of humor. I think she likes to play with her food.
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah. So she pulls him off. Kyle somehow gets the car started and drives to the hospital himself.
Yes. And he's calling the hospital on the way on a sweet Nokia cell phone that I had the exact same one in 2003.
Corinne was very excited to see her phone on TV.
Because I lost that one in the parking lot at Crossroads Mall and never had it again.
But that is a weird place to lose a phone. How did that happen?
I don't know. I was driving that stupid Merker and it broke down all the time.
Yep.
And we were sitting there waiting for it to cool down so I could put like more coolant fluid in it or whatever.
Yeah.
And I think I was sitting there playing Snake on my Nokia phone.
Sure, because that's all you did.
Yeah. And waiting for my car to cool down. And when it finally did, and I was so excited to get the hell out of that parking garage, I left it there on the ground. And we didn't have, like, cell phones weren't as much of an extension as us. You know how people have anxiety now? Like, they can feel the lack of their phone. We didn't have that yet.
Nope.
Yeah. So anyway, so he calls the hospital and he's like, this is Kyle, whatever his last name is. And
please tell Caitlin not to put Michael in the dark.
Yeah. And so the first thing that the hospital receptionist does is call the police and say, hey, that guy you arrested here earlier is on his way back.
Yeah.
So
super great.
At the hospital, they are busily putting Michael into what is definitely an MRI machine and not a sensory deprivation tank.
Right.
As anyone who's had an MRI will immediately notice. And I guess maybe I only noticed because I've had one super recently, but...
Me too. But that could be why.
Yeah.
But yeah, they're putting him into an MRI. They had to sedate him because he's very little and you have to hold very still.
Yeah.
In an MRI. I don't know about a sensory deprivation.
Yeah, it was so weird.
Good point. Maybe they were like trying to calm him down like it was more of an anxiety thing.
Yeah.
that they thought, hey, if we drug him up, he'll be in the dark and he'll see, like, we'll calm him down chemically and then he'll see there's nothing to be afraid of.
Yeah.
Maybe.
I could see that.
Yeah.
I guess. But who knows?
Who knows? We're not doctors. We just play him on TV. So then...
So Michael is being slowly pushed into this MRI/sensory deprivation thing.
And Kyle, like, busts through the doors and is like, don't put Michael in the dark.
Yeah.
And Caitlin's like, okay. And they don't.
And Michael, at this point, the only part of him that's left in the light is like his eyes, and the rest of him's in the dark of the machine. And at every other point when Michael's left even partially in the dark, she's like grabbing at his arms and stuff.
Yeah.
I would think she'd still be able to kill him even if he was mostly in the machine, but maybe she was still busily like eating Larry, I guess.
Maybe, because he was fine.
Yeah.
So they pull him out, and Kyle immediately gets arrested again.
He gets tackled by all the deputies
Yeah.
again. And he's screaming at Caitlin, don't let him go in the dark.
Yeah. And Caitlin's like, okay, I won't.
Yeah. So,
All right. So he goes back to jail.
Yeah.
And he's stuck in a jail cell, and the cops are all giving him a really hard time. Like,
Teasing him about like,
Yeah.
oh, you're afraid of the dark. And
hey, mother killer, you doing okay? Like,
Yeah.
all kinds of garbage. And then there's a massive blackout
yes.
across the whole town. And then they start hearing noises in the police station. So they go off to investigate,
Yeah.
and slowly all get killed.
And it's such a good scene too, or series of scenes, whatever, because the setup is fantastic. Kyle is trapped in a cell that's open on all sides, like it's not cinder block, it's actual bars all the way around.
And it's like just in the middle of the room.
Yeah, in the
which
middle
is an
of
interesting
the-
way to build a jail cell. I mean, they clearly don't get too many criminals in Darkness Falls.
Yeah, it's like a short term holding a cell or whatever in the middle of the bullpen or whatever. And so he's number one trapped. So if all the lights go out, he's dead. And then he can't do anything to help anyone. All he can do is watch in horror as all of these deputies get, yanked away and eaten. And the Tooth Fairy is cleverly like tricking them into shooting out the lights because she's flying in front of the lights so that when they're shooting at her, they're plunging the room into even deeper darkness. I liked it. I thought it was a great scene.
It was way cool. It was way cool. And so one by one, she just starts picking off the cops.
And one of the cops is like, earlier before all of the terrible things happens, and one of them's teasing Kyle. He's teasing it like, oh, is she gonna get me? And Kyle just deadpan is like, yes.
And then she does.
She does. He was the first one to die.
Yep. So Kyle, one of the cops gets killed conveniently right outside the bars. So he's able to get the keys and open a jail cell. And there's just one cop left. And he's like, we have to get to the hospital. Can you help me?
Yeah.
And
it's
he
the
saves the
sheriff's
guy
son.
too. Yeah.
Yeah.
He like gets to his bag, gets all his flashlights. They scare her off with all the lights. And then he's like, can you help me get to the hospital? And he's like, yeah, let's go. And they hop in his car and head to the hospital because he's like, we got to get to Michael. She's going to eat Michael and Caitlin, the love of my life when I was 11 to 19. Somewhere in that span of time. So they head to the hospital. Caitlin and Michael are there. And here's the other thing. So they're in a hospital. The hospital has no emergency backup generator or any sort of like backup electrical system. So the power goes out and the hospital is just in total darkness except for like some emergency lights. So unrealistic. I hope that no one is on some sort of life-saving machinery in the hospital because they'll be dead.
Yeah, most hospitals do have like pretty solid generators.
Yes. Like, and generators to back up the backup generators in case power goes out. Because when you're in a hospital, you need electricity.
Yeah.
And running water. These things are very important. No.
So in this
hospital's totally dark for some reason. So
it's dark
Michael is hiding under his bed. And Caitlin's like, come on, Michael, don't hide under the bed. And he's like, no, get under here with me. And then she starts to hear noises and she's like, okay, maybe I'll hide under the bed with you. So they hide under the bed and the bed starts like moving and they hear the Tooth Fairy out there. And so Caitlin's like, pretty quickly, oh crap, he was right. There really is something after him.
Yeah.
Which I would have liked to see her have a moment with him. Like, I'm sorry I didn't believe you. Like, you were right. None of that. None of that ever happens. It's just like, oh, okay, someone's trying to kill us. Let's deal with this now.
Yeah.
So, that was my only little thing that I was like, I would have liked a little moment there. Like, oh, this really is a thing. No, none of that.
Yeah.
So they, like, the bed gets thrown off of them. So they have to run. And they get out into the hall, and she immediately goes to the elevator, which the power is out, but the elevator is working.
I'll be honest, my brain didn't think twice about it. I was too distracted by the fact that Kyle was about to get cut in half by the elevator.
Well, that's later.
Oh, okay.
But, because she just goes out and pushes the button for the elevator. Like, there's no power in the hospital. She immediately goes to the elevator. And pushes the button and waits for it while the Tooth Fairy is coming at her.
I think what this says about Corinne is that in a crisis situation, I would also go push the elevator button. Because in my brain, they work on some magical fairy power that just works all the time.
I mean, it's a hospital. It should have a generator that runs the elevator, but everything else wasn't working.
Yeah, like maybe the backup emergency lights and the elevator. Who knows?
Maybe that's the only thing the generator can run.
Yeah.
Hopefully also like the artificial lungs and stuff. Yeah. But so the elevator doors open and Kyle's in there with road flares inside the tiny little elevator box. So he starts the road flares and throws one out of the elevator and pulls them inside. So they're all safe in the elevator, air quotes. So the elevator starts going down and the Tooth Fairy rips the roof off the elevator and like stops the elevator.
Yeah.
So they are just opening more emergency flares in the elevator. Elevators are small. Let's have open flame. I don't.
But, you know, versus the greater threat. Like you're about to get eaten by this creepy old lady anyway. So.
And again, they're in a hospital where you should not have open flame. There's things like oxygen tanks everywhere. But he throws a flare outside of the hospital, like straight into a hospital hallway, like, hope nobody blowed up. I don't care. Anyway. That's all. So, you know, it just, if it was anywhere but a hospital, it would make more sense in my head.
Yeah.
So they're in the elevator, and she's, like, trying to snatch him from the ceiling, and they're throwing all these flares. And then does she fly away, or is that a little later? So then there are people outside in the hall who pry open the doors. And the elevator is, like, halfway stuck, which... just a terrible, like, so they have to crawl through the little hole, which is one of my
number one things.
Yeah. Can't handle it. Thanks, Final Destination 2. So, they're all crawling out through the little gap between the floor and the elevator door to, like, get out of the elevator that the Tooth Fairy's trying to kill them in. And they all get through except Kyle. And Kyle goes to crawl through, and the Tooth Fairy lets go of the elevator cables because apparently she's been holding them this whole time. And the elevator starts to move, and he barely gets out of there without being killed.
Yeah. Which, again, number one fear.
Right.
Terrifying.
Totally terrifying scene. Really well done. Other than, you know, the flares being thrown about.
And the question of where did the elevator get the power?
Yes. All those things. So... then comes, like, my favorite scene in the whole movie, which Corinne commented as we were watching it that it was also her favorite scene.
Oh, yeah, I love this.
So they have to go down this hallway where emergency lights are only on one side. So they have to, like, press up against the wall and sort of, like, shimmy down the hallway to stay in the light. So they all are doing that, and they now have 2 nurses and a doctor with them that helped pull them out of the elevator. And now they've all seen the Tooth Fairy, so they're gonna die. So they're like, stay with us if you want to live. Michael and Kyle start making their way down the hallway, and one of the nurses is like, I'm just gonna walk like a normal person, and immediately gets snatched by the fairy.
That's what you get for not listening to a random person you've just encountered in the hospital in a power outage. I mean, come on.
If he says, push up against the wall and stay in the light, you stay in the light.
Mm-hmm.
Whatever. So, so the nurse immediately gets snatched and eaten, or does she come back down? I can't remember.
I don't remember. She's not important.
I think she gets eaten. Yeah, she's gone. So everyone else is freaking out, and they're like, oh, okay, we'll stay in the light. And right before the last nurse comes across, like down the hallway, one of the lights burns out, and it gets dark, and she gets snatched.
Yeah. Well, is that before the staircase?
Yeah.
Okay.
So then they come up to a staircase, and Caitlin and Michael have already gone down the stairs. They just ran. Mm-hmm. And Kyle and the doctor were trying to help the nurse, but she got eaten.
Oh, no, there's still a nurse with them. Isn't there?
Oh, there is still a nurse with them. So that one first nurse must not have gotten eaten yet, but she has now. So then they get to the stairs, and the other two have already made it to the bottom, but the stairs are only lit on the landings. Mm-hmm. So they figure out, okay, we have to jump.
From like patch of light on the one landing down a full flight of stairs to a patch of light on the bottom.
Yeah. Which I don't know. Have you ever tried to jump like a whole flight of stairs?
No, because I value my legs.
We used to do it all the time at Keith and Dana's, but it was like a split level.
Oh, so a half flight.
It was like a half a flight. Yeah, but we would jump not necessarily to the basement because there was that wall that you would just smack into, but like from the upstairs to the door. But like it reminded me of that. Like, and that was a pretty big jump. It's like a full flight of stairs. I don't know. That seems dead.
Yeah.
So, so the three of them are like, she can't get all of us. And Kyle, of course, is in the middle. So they all jump, and she grabs the nurse on the end.
Yes.
And like she's now
snaps
dead.
Her up.
Yeah.
I love this scene so much. I feel so bad because I laughed out of pure joy when the nurse got like snatched in the air.
Well, and to me, I was just like, of course she did.
Yes.
Like, she should have been on Star Trek wearing a red shirt. You knew she wasn't going to make it. So then the doctor and Kyle have to jump one more time. Mm-hmm. And they go to jump. Well, the first time they jump, they're like, let's all jump together. She can't grab all of us. Mm-hmm. Sort of like storming Area 51, right? Like, they can't
stop us all.
Yeah. But, you know, she only needed to eat one. So then they go to jump the last little landing, and she grabs Kyle. Mm-hmm. And Caitlin immediately, like, runs up the stairs to save him.
Right.
Because, you know, they're in love. And... Sorry, I rolled my eyes hard for you folks at home. So, those who know me know how I feel about incredible love stories that develop in less than like 12 hours. Yeah. Yes. So, this is one of those.
We know nothing about who you've become as an adult, but
right?
We're in love with you.
I love you. I love you. What's your last name again? Yeah, hate that crap. So... she runs up, grabs him, and then magically, the cop from earlier drives his car through the wall. We are still in a hospital, mind you. He drives his car into the hospital. So his headlights come and save the day. Scares away the Tooth Fairy. Totally great scene. Love it. But yeah, he drives his car into the side of a hospital.
Yes.
And magically, it's where they all are.
Yes.
Perfect.
So strange.
Because that's something a cop would do.
So they all
drive his car into a hospital. So they all pile
the Bronco
into...
or whatever.
Yeah, it's like a Bronco, I would say. And... which we were talking about how it created a whole fear of clowns, right? Or like sharks going to the beach. Did you know they stopped making Broncos after OJ's car chase?
Yes.
And I was like... that is one of those, like, infamous things. Like, how would it be to be such a big criminal if they don't make that car anymore?
Yeah.
Like, they still make Volkswagen Bugs.
Even though Ted Bundy,
rocked one. Yeah. But they don't make Ford Broncos anymore. I think they started to recently.
Did they really?
Anyway.
Well, I think Is it John Mulaney that has a bit about that? About like,
Oh, it might be.
what would you have to do to get them to like stop making the Corolla?
That's right. It might be. Anyway,
This
sorry,
marks
side
like the
note.
5th time that we've mentioned John Mulaney on this podcast. And John Mulaney, we would just like you to know that we adore you and you're our favorite.
We do, and we are crazy in love with you. So
He's a married man, Jill.
doesn't mean I can't have a crush.
He has a dog named Petunia.
I'm not going to act on it. I just like looking at him and hearing him talk.
Yeah, mostly listening to him talk.
Yes. So anywho, they're in the Bronco. They're driving down the street. And so it's the doctor and Kyle and Caitlin and Michael and the cop. And they're all driving in this Bronco. And the doctor's like, I don't understand. Why don't we just keep driving? And he immediately gets snatched out of the car by the Tooth Fairy.
How dare you make a logical argument?
So clearly his plan is not going to work. So they pull out some lights. They try to scare her away. And the cop's like, hey, I've got a couple of kerosene lanterns back there. So they light up the kerosene lanterns. And Caitlin and Kyle hold hands
Aw.
in the car. And it's precious. And they head to this lighthouse because they decide we're going to go to the lighthouse. That's how we're going to kill her.
Yeah, because Caitlin had kind of gotten the idea from a book of fairy stories that she was reading in Michael's hospital room way earlier, where some evil hag was killed by light from a mirror. Mm-hmm. And a lighthouse has a big mirror to make the powerful light.
Big mirror and big light. So they're like, it's not run on electricity. It's run by like gas. Let's go to the lighthouse.
But, and I don't know this much about lighthouses. I know that they're cool, and I know that they kind of scare me. But earlier when they showed the power in the entire town going out, the lighthouse went out.
Yep.
So
I would assume that the lighthouse, because the whole point of a lighthouse is to run during a storm. So I would assume it has some sort of backup power.
Okay,
Yeah.
so they're going to go turn on the backup.
Yeah.
Okay.
That would be my guess. But again, they show up at the lighthouse. Kyle immediately starts fixing the lighthouse. He was like 11 when he got arrested.
He knows an awful lot about lighthouses.
Institutionalized for 9 years, but he can fix an engine or generator in a lighthouse.
Yeah, you assume he's lived his whole adult life in Las Vegas, where lighthouses are plentiful.
But he can work a lighthouse like it's nobody's business.
Yes.
So they walk in, start fixing the lighthouse. The lighthouse, they go up to the top and try to get it to work. The lighthouse is like, it won't stay lit. And so they're like, there's got to be like a leak or something. And they walk down the creepy spiral stairs in the lighthouse and see there's a gas leak. One of the, it's not a pipe, but tube is leaking and just spilling gas everywhere. So they go to fix it, and the cop just gets eaten by the Tooth Fairy. They weren't in the light enough. He's dead.
And he wasn't a main character enough to make it to the end. So.
Right. So Kyle like fixes the leak, but falls when she snatches the cop and falls down to the bottom of the lighthouse where he is soaked in gasoline and inches away from a flame. And so you're like, oh no, don't catch on fire. So then she goes, of course, you know, he's unconscious. She could just eat him. But instead she goes back up and tries to eat Caitlin and Michael. So she grabs Caitlin and tries to like lift her up in the air. And Kyle throws fire at her. I'm not going to lie. I missed how that happened.
I don't know what happened.
He threw a fireball at her.
Yeah.
I don't know how. So she drops Caitlin. And Caitlin falls pretty far, like probably halfway down the lighthouse.
She definitely seems to have broken some bones.
Yes. Oh, and Kyle didn't quite get the leak fixed. So he's like, okay, get up. We got to fix this. We got to get the lighthouse going. So she's like circling around, trying to get them all. Kyle gets the lighthouse fixed and it starts up. And like right as the Tooth Fairy is in front of the big bulb, lighthouse light. And she's like, ah, and runs away. And they're all hugging, and you're like, yay, they're happy. They're going to live happily ever after. It's amazing. And then suddenly the Tooth Fairy comes back and grabs Kyle. And so she grabs him and pulls him away from everybody else. And he grabs her mask and throws it off of her face and reveals just like this gross, burned nastiness. And her porcelain mask falls to the floor, and it's like made of teeth.
Yeah. So when it shatters, little children's teeth fall everywhere.
Real gross.
Yeah.
So then he says Corinne's favorite line.
Okay. I was all excited for this. I couldn't remember what the line was, but I turned to Jill and I was like, isn't some epic line coming? So the Tooth Fairy's holding him up, and he's covered in the gas still. So he, like, reaches back an arm to the light that's burning, and he, like, sets his hand on fire, and he looks at her and he goes, I see you, bitch. And he, like,
Lights
sets
her
her
on
on fire with his fire hand.
Yeah.
Which, like, in terms of epic last line and, like, a big climactic battle in a horror movie, it's okay.
Yeah.
It's like, it's no Leprechaun with you, Lucky Charms. Like, it's pretty good, but it
could have been better.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. So he sets her on fire. This time she legit burns and explodes. Like, no chance she's coming back. Or is there?
Or is there? Dun, dun, dun.
Dun, dun, dun. So, cut to some other random little boy, and he's getting tucked into bed. He is an appropriate age to have lost a tooth and be tucked into bed. And his dad's tucking him in, puts his tooth under the pillow and says, just remember, don't peek. And the little boy's like, okay, and goes to sleep. And then he, like, starts to hear noises, and you're like, oh no, it's happening. And then his mom pops out and scares him, like, accidentally. But all of a sudden, there's a mom. The mom's like, hey, sorry, I didn't mean to scare you, just came to say goodnight. And, like, leans in to kiss him and switches his tooth for a quarter.
Yeah.
And the kid just goes to sleep.
And
then the movie ends.
Roll credits, cue rock and roll, and
11 minutes.
11 minutes of credits, yeah. Because honestly, I don't know how long this podcast is going to be by the time I'm done editing it. We've been talking a while, and there's been some nonsense of getting up. But I'm pretty confident that this episode will be longer than this film.
Yeah. It is an hour and 26 minutes long. And that is probably with the 11 minutes of credits.
So yeah, this, we've said it before, I'll say it again. This is one of those movies that's so bad in all of the exact right ways that it's so much fun. Like, it's rewatchable again and again, and it's got a whole bunch of problems and plot holes up the wazoo, and I don't even
care.
The writers didn't have any idea how old a single character was.
No.
But it is so much fun.
Yeah, like, all of these things that I kept talking about, like, how the crap old is Kyle, I don't care. I will still watch this movie come next October.
Exactly.
And enjoy so much of it. Like, it's just really fun.
It's classic. It's fun. It had a good score that worked really well. It's fun. And it's teensy. So it's one of those quick watches.
Quick watch. Yeah, for sure. I think we usually end up watching it as a double feature because it's so short. Like, watch 2 in one night.
So maybe watch Hocus Pocus after this one.
There you go.
But yeah, definitely recommended for your October film watching. It will, if you are anything like us, make you afraid of the dark corners of your house.
Absolutely. And teeth.
I'm afraid of teeth anyway.
Which we started talking about wanting to watch this because we had watched that
Don't Be Afraid
of the Dark, and there was all the teeth in that. And then we were like,
Everyone
let's
in that
watch
movie's
a good one about teeth.
They're like handling the teeth. Like, it's not something gross that came out of someone's mouth. Their mouth, Jill. The grossest part of someone's body.
Yep.
Well,
I can't.
They're grosser parts, but still.
No teeth.
Yeah, but overall, good movie. Holds up. One of those ones that if you liked it in the theater, you'll probably still like it today.
Yeah, absolutely. Don't beat up someone because you think they may have killed their mother. That's what we learned from this movie.
That's Jill's takeaway. My takeaway is you're never too old to lose your last tooth, I guess.
And it's best if no one knows how old you actually are.
Oh, I'll stand by that.
Keep them guessing.
Yeah. Be a 30 never if you can. Well, on that ambiguous note.
Yep. Thanks for listening.
This has been Scream Girl Squad.